Hello and welcome back to my channel. This video is the second part of the series of React interview questions with answers. In this part 2, we are going to prepare for another 10 questions with answers. Before we get started, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, then please subscribe and watch the video till end. Before we start, here is the short intro. So the question number 11. All elements in the React are components. Explain this. So all elements in React are components. This is the question which a user or the interviewer can ask you. So the answer to the question can be, in React application, the UI is constructed using components as the fundamental units. These components are designed to self-contained and can be reused, allowing the entire UI to be broken down into smaller, more manageable pieces. This is the main word. The rendering of each component is done independently of the others without any impact of the rest of the UI. So whenever an interviewer asks you about why we say the React components, all elements in React are components, so the answer could be those are more manageable, and then they can be broken down into smaller pieces so that they can be easily and independently render themselves, and in that way they do not impact on the other UI elements. Okay, the next question is, what is the function of the render method in React? So the render method is a mandatory to have in every React component. Here I am specifically saying it as React component. This render function must return a single React element presenting corresponding native DOM component. In case there are multiple HTML elements to be rendered, they must be enclosed with a single tags like form, group, div, react.frame fragment, something like that. The render function must always be kept pure, meaning it should return the same result each time it is called. So this is the main thing, like it should be kept as pure component, a pure function, and it should return the same result each time it is called. Question number 13. What is the process for combining two or more components into a single component? So we can embed one or more component into the one component in following way. For example, I am having one class component which is called as header, which is only returning this h1 tag with header component word written into it as a return component, JSX component. So in the other class component, which is called as my component, what I am doing is in the return method for the render, I am writing h1 with hello and returning that header component, or using that header component which is pointing to this component, and putting it in here will render when I render this my component onto my content, like that. This is my div structure with id as content. It will render something like it will return something like hello, then header, then component. Sorry, my writing is not that much good in here, but you got the point, right? So this is my first component, which is my component, and this is coming from my header component, which is here. Okay. The next question is, what does the term props mean in the context of React? So the answer to this question is, in React, prop is shorthand terms for properties. The props are components that are read-only. This is main thing. and must be kept pure. That means they cannot be changed after they are set. And that's why they are called as read-only, and it should be pure. It must be kept pure. These components are always passed down from parent component to child component through the entire application. This is a very, very important statement in here for the props. Like it is passing it, they are passed from the parent component to the child component throughout the entire application. That means it is not possible for a child component to send properties back to the parent component. This approach helps to maintain a unidirectional data flow and is commonly used to render dynamically generated data. In my previous video, we have discussed that React is having a unidirectional flow. That means a data flow from one direction to other in this term like parent to child. And in this way, React is maintaining that unidirectional flow for the application. Can you explain what a state means in React and how it is utilized? When we have the props, it obvious the user will or the interviewer will ask you about the states. So a React component rely on state as their core functionality. The states serve as the primary source of data and should be kept as straightforward as possible. It try to be as straightforward as simple with states. Don't try to complex, make them complex. In essence, state are objects that are determine the rendering and the behavior of the component. So you can set the state values, and according to that, you can determine how your components will show, how they will hide, or whatever you want to do, how they will render in this particular case with the state properties. You can decide according to that. Unlike props, states are mutable and enable the creation of dynamic and interactive components. So according to this, the states can be changed. They are mutable. They can be mutate themselves or we can mutate them and we can have the interactive components using that. This can be accessed, like states can be accessed using this dot state method. Question number 16. How can you distinguish between states and props in React? So here is the comparison between a state and props which are available in React. These are different conditions and this is yes or no, like how they will behave to that condition. First one is receive initial value from parent component. Both state as well as props receive it from the parent component. Parent component can change value. The answer to that is no. State cannot be changed by the parent component, but props can be changed by the parent component. Set default value inside component, that is true for both. We can set the values for both in the component for the state and props. The value of that particular state or props can be changed inside component. Yes, states can be changed, but props are read only as we discussed earlier. That cannot be changed. The fifth point is the set initial value for child component. Yes, for straight state and props. For both the things, we can have the value set for the child components in here. This is actually no. This is no. The sixth point is changes inside child components that can be possible or we should do it. For the state, no, and for the props, yes, we can make changes inside child component for the props. Question number 17. What is the process for modifying the state of a component? Okay. So a state of a component can be updated using this statement. This is the syntax for this dot set state, and in that you will provide your state variable's name. For example, this is an example code where I have a my component as my class component, and this is my state defined inside constructor where it has a name as Seeger and value ID as 101. In the render method, after 2000 milliseconds of timeout, let's say 2 seconds of timeout, I want to change its state's value. for the name property for the name and ID variable from Seeger to Seeger the way, ID from 101 to 102. So when this ID will be print, this will be hello Seeger the way, because it has the timeout and now the value has been set, and your ID would be 102. This is how we can set. This is a syntax for that. This is a syntax for that. Sorry, it's the wrong one. Let me try to do that again. This is the syntax, this dot set state. This is the curly braces, the name of the property which we want to set, and how. This is how we can set that. Question number 18. What is the arrow function in React? How is it used? So the arrow functions are concise syntax for writing function expressions and sometimes referred to as fat arrow functions as well. So sometimes an interviewer can ask you what is fat arrow function or what is arrow function. So you should understand, like, those are synonyms. Arrow function and fat arrow function are same. These fat arrow function or arrow functions enable the proper binding of component context, as automatic binding is not available by default in ES6. So this is very important to understand in this case, like ES6 does not support automatic binding. So when we use this arrow function property or these arrow functions syntax, it will help to bind these objects. For example, in general way, this is how we write our without the arrow function. This is how we do the binding with our event. For example, I want to bind this on change event with this handle change function. I will do in this way. This is a syntax. But with the arrow function, I can simply write on change equal to this arrow function or the fat arrow functions, and this is how I can write the syntax for this. This is a general way, and this is with arrow function. So the question number 20. Can you describe the various stages that a React component goes through during its life cycle? So basically the question is related to the component's life cycle for React. The React component's life cycle can be divided into three distinct phases: initial rendering phase, updating phase, and unmounting phase. The initial rendering phase marks the beginning of component journey, during which it starts to make its way into the DOM, that is initial rendering phase. The updating phase is when a component is added to the DOM that can be updated or re-rendered only when there is a change either to the prop or state. This phase is the only time when such changes can occur. This is the time when we can change the state and props of our component, and that will re-render our component onto the DOM. And the third phase is unmounting phase, where the final phase of the component's life cycle, where the component is destroyed and removed from the DOM. Okay, so that concludes our React interview questions with answers part 2. I hope that this session has been helpful to you in preparing for your upcoming interview. Remember, the key to acing any interview is to be confident, knowledgeable, and prepared. In part 3 of this session, we will be discussing more React interview questions with answers. So stay tuned for part 3 and make sure to practice your answers to these questions and review the concept we covered today. With a little bit of preparation and a lot of confidence, you will do well in your way for acing your interview. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in part 3.